We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Rev Nathaniel W Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
How you doing? My name is Pastor Nathaniel W Martin, pastor of New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in Los Angeles, California. And the name of my little program is called It's Time. And what is it time for? It's time for economic justice. It's time for ecological or environmental justice. And most of all, it's time for economic, which means that we include reparations in our demands and in our declarations. No harm in acknowledging that we need reparations for 246 years of unrequited toil, as well as from 1900 on through 1968. Just to talk a little bit of de jure, as you say, as opposed to de facto segregation and discrimination, during which time we were locked out. I mean black people in America, were locked out of the economic uplift that the federal government showered upon its Caucasian and its white citizens. Our marching orders come from the 24th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, beginning at verse 14. It says, "Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant," that means an employee, that is poor and needy, whether they be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At that day, that means when they finish working, thou shalt give them their hire, that you give them their pay. Neither shall the sun go down upon it, for they are poor, and set their hearts upon it, lest they cry out against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee. That's the word of God, my brothers and sisters, for how we are to treat each other as relates to our engagements with each other, our interrelationships with each other. It's an overarching demand for fairness and equity on everybody's part. On the part of the person who is the laborer, you must do an honest day's work, and on the part of the person who has engaged or hired the laborer, you must honor your commitment, especially because if you keep your money and you keep mine too, as the old saying goes, what in the world am I going to do? But seriously, notice that God considers that oppression, which is a political term. God does not want us to oppress each other, because in point of fact, God is never on the side of the oppressor, but he is always on the side of the oppressed. As we said in last week, God spoke to Moses. He said, "I have heard the cry of my children of Israel, and I am come down to deliver them." Remember, Pharaoh was an economic and political system, political juggernaut. He had armies. Amen. He had a great military, and he had a very effective police force that had done a great job in keeping the children of Israel in subjection for over 400 years. But when God gets ready to free his people, not even a system as they had in Egypt can withstand an onslaught from God. So if you are an oppressor, and you need to straighten up your act and fly right. You need to do like Zacchaeus said, "If I've defrauded any man, I will give them back fourfold from what I have defrauded them out of." You know, Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and he kept, by the Roman government, he was allowed to keep a certain percentage of all of the taxes that he collected. As a matter of fact, as long as Rome got their percentage, Rome didn't care how much extra he made off of each individual taxpayer. As long as Rome was satisfied with the amount that they received. So a tax collector could get very fat, very quick, make a lot of money off of the taxes that the people were compelled. I said compelled, just like you and me, compelled to pay. But it was easy for the tax collector to defraud the people because he kept his own books and he could set the rate. Isn't that right? And so that gave the tax collector a lot of leeway. I bring that up because of the fact that he was an oppressor. That's why he was oppressing the poor. It was hard enough for them to pay what they were paying. Let me get rid of this call. And excuse me, y'all. But it was even worse, the fact that these tax collectors were getting filthy rich. As you remember when Levi, or Matthew as he is better known, came to Jesus, he had a very fine palatial home. He wasn't living in no hut. He wasn't doing bad at all. Is that right? And a lot of that was because that he was able to defraud the poor. He defrauded the people who were paying their lawful taxes. And he got rich off of it. Tax collectors get rich in those days. I don't know about now. But God is never on the side of the oppressor. He's always on the side of the oppressed. Is that right? And that's why in Deuteronomy it says, "Thou shalt not oppress." And these are very, very serious declaration or imperatives that God has made a universal law of nature for the whole world, is that none of us must oppress any of us. We must treat all of our brothers and our sisters with fairness and equity in all of our dealings with them. And I know sometimes we slip, but it must be only sometime that we slip. And it must not be major. It certainly must never be lethal, and must never become habitual or addictive. And please believe me, power is addictive and intoxicating. And that's why God set these rules and set these commandments. What did Jesus say? By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. Because if I love you, or if you love me, then we're going to minimize how much we defraud each other. I trust that we will. Now, the second scripture that we have today is one in the book of James, James chapter 5 and verse number 4, which says, "Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped," I mean, they've already done the work, "reap down your fields, wages of you kept back by" what? Fraud. "Crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped, of them which have worked, that have labored, who have toiled honestly, are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth." And so the working person, woman and man, boy or girl, has God on their side. And so when you don't pay people what you owe them, then that's just like you didn't pay God. And remember, God has a way of collecting all debts. It's not in vain that the prayer says, "Forgive us our debts and we forgive our debtors." If you owe God, God has a way of seeing to it that we meet or take care of our obligations. Don't ever try to cheat the Lord. And Jesus said in one of the parables that gives us understanding, "Inasmuch as you have done this unto one of the least of these my brothers and my sisters, you have done that unto me." Amen. And you certainly do not want God to come and collect. I know I don't. And one must therefore be honest and straightforward, not because that we can pay God or because we can buy God, but God gave us things and duties and obligation to fulfill, to perform, to help one another. Remember, we cannot say that we love God whom we've never seen and hate our brothers and our sisters that we see every day. Is that right? Are we not all made in the image and the likeness of God? And so we must be very, very mindful of our morality, our ethics, and our mores, and our anger and our rage or our emotions. We must never get intoxicated with power where we feel that we can just run roughshod over humanity. Remember the great tyrants who have trod across the stage of history have all disappeared. Alexander the Great is gone. Genghis Khan is gone. Jefferson Davis, who was one of the principal proponents of secession, along with Alexander Stevens and the Rhett brothers and all of that ilk that felt that they could eat their bread based upon the sweat of another man's brow. That all of those people wound up defeated. I said defeated. And regardless of how history may have unfolded subsequent, those tyrants were defeated because God is always on the side of the oppressed. Inasmuch as you have done this unto one of the least of these, my brothers or my sisters, ye have done it unto me. We must always be mindful of how we handle our business affairs, because we may think that we are cheating John and we really were cheating God. Wish I had a witness. Amen. And so we are in the midst of a great period of history. Sister Aretha Franklin was being eulogized today and interred today in her hometown of Detroit, Michigan. And our hearts go out to the Franklin family, to the children and the family there. And we trust God's care upon those family members. Amen. She had left a tremendous legacy to fulfill, and yet she has left a great void in the hearts of her family members, because you could see the sorrow in their faces and in their voices, and such great souls as Stevie Wonder and Smokey Robinson certainly let you know how deeply they felt the loss of their friend and their colleague and their contemporary, the great Queen of Soul, Miss Aretha Franklin, has gone. But I trust and we know that she will never be forgotten, because her voice and her music, for most of us, formed the soundtrack of our lives. It's always been a Franklin in the back, whether it was her father, C.L., or whether it was Aretha herself. All of us have been benefited and blessed by the vocal stylings, the ministry, and the life of Aretha Franklin. I didn't know she even went so far as to offer to put up the bail for Angela Davis when Angela Davis was in jail or in prison, and the government was not going to immediately allow her to have bail, or people were afraid to come forward. I found out today that her father was upset because she was going to do that, but she told her father she's a black woman and black women must be free. Amen. Right on, Queen Aretha. And so these things, although they're small anecdotes, really give you a window, an insight into the deeper thinking and motivations of Sister Aretha Franklin. Now, I'm not going to go back and eulogize because they had some great souls there to eulogize her today. And I'm sure you're going to look at the video, and I encourage you to do so and see what you think about it, because it was very inspirational and uplifting even in spite of the fact that it was a funeral and that those who have seen her shall see her no more. But the voice still remains on the CDs and albums and all the other MP3s and other paraphernalia by which we get our music now. And so I'm sure there'll be a great renewal, a revival of interest in the music of Aretha Franklin, going all the way back, I'm sure, to her early days with Columbia and before. I know on YouTube they got a lot of her early, at that time it wasn't video, there was somebody up there with a camera, 8mm camera, and happened to film some of her singing, and some of that is available on the YouTube. And just like you go on YouTube and you see KTYM Media, and you can hit the subscribe button, we hope you would do so. If you hit that thumbs up button, trust that you would do that also, and become a follower of KTYM Media and of Its Time and of yours truly, your humble servant, Rev Nathaniel W Martin. The W stands for Wayne, for those of you that don't know. And in spite of the fact that most of our business is done without mention of a middle name, I still honor my middle name. It was given to me by my mom and daddy, so why shouldn't I? Go ahead, witness. Now, to the matter of the President of the United States and that fraud that was committed during the election campaign in the run-up to the election, 2016 election, and there's been no small amount of stir created by the Mueller investigation, and Donald Trump has tried to disparage Mr. Mueller and disparage that inquiry or that investigation by saying it's a witch hunt. And it may be a witch hunt, but if you're a witch and I'm hunting you, baby, I may catch up with you. And it seems that is what Mr. Mueller is doing to Monsieur Trump, that he's getting the low-hanging fruit and closing in on the main character, which is one Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States of America, who, according to the charges and to the plea deals that Mr. Cohen made, and to the convictions that Mr. Manafort sustained in the legal system in the last week or so, that now Mr. Donald Trump is what's known as an unindicted, means no charges have been brought against him, co-conspirator. But by the same token, Cohen has confessed to the judge in his trial that he did pay off Stormy Daniels and some other woman whose name I don't recall, but there were two women at least, and he paid these women off at the behest, get this, of of a candidate for high federal office, at the behest of a candidate who was running for federal office. Now, just in case you don't know, the only candidate running for federal office that Mr. Cohen worked for and represented was Donald Trump. Guess who? So, although he didn't use the name Donald Trump and he didn't use the title president, I think that was a kind of a legal ploy that would give the Mueller team the cover that they needed not to bring charges against President Trump while he is a sitting president. There's not a law that says you can't charge a president, but they have a rule that they try to observe, that they don't charge a sitting president, or they don't indict a sitting president while he is in office. And isn't it interesting how the worm turns, you know? The Republicans were gung-ho to impeach Bill Clinton, but now they're not so gung-ho when the Democrats have the ball in their court. And I think the Democrats need to stop playing such footsie and such pansy and step up with some charges against number 45 and let the chips fall where they may. But in light of the fact that Manafort and now Cohen have both pleaded guilty and are both now convicted felons, it's a good thing that the Democrats did not jump the gun too soon before these new facts came out. There are also some more facts that came to light today about a certain payoff that was made on behalf of a Russian dignitary that wanted to attend the inauguration of President Trump, but he could not because of some FEC rules that barred him from paying for a ticket or whatever it was to that inauguration, but that through some other intermediary in the Trump campaign that this payment was made, and this person did attend Trump's inauguration. So the plot thickens, and things are really starting to heat up, in a manner of speaking. And Mr. Trump may have to hire himself a new attorney in order to meet this flood of new charges that may be headed his way. Remember, his close associates have been convicted, and his son is in danger of being charged, as well as Jared Kushner and that ilk. And remember, on the outskirts is one Omarosa Manigault Newman, who has a book out. Oh, yes. And I was reading on the tell-all newspapers today where Trump wants Miss Omarosa to be arrested so that she will not be able to make her plea, make her case to the general public and be on the talk shows and the like. How interesting life is, huh? Yes, be sure your sins will find you out. And that's what's happening to Mr. Trump. Things are beginning to be revealed that he would prefer had been kept secret and out of sight and out of mind. Now, my brothers and my sisters, how does all of this coincide with what the scripture says? Why, the fraud and the oppression. I want to say one other thing about that Mr. Trump. He's a very small fellow because simultaneously with the funeral of Aretha Franklin, there's the funeral for John McCain. And even though Mr. McCain said that he didn't want Mr. Trump at his funeral, Mr. Trump still had the opportunity and the obligation as the President of the United States of America to eulogize and to extend the courtesy of the federal government, to the McCain family and say something nice. But no, he didn't even let the flag stay down at half-mast. They put the flag down for one a day, and the next day the flag is back up full staff. And his own people had to get on him, Donald Trump's people, in order to get him to put the flag back down at half-mast. How small can you be? How vindictive, how vengeful can you be? And that's what we have in Donald J. Trump. We have somebody who only looks out for themselves, very myopic, very selfish, very narcissistic, and that's going to hurt him. And I think this thing he did with McCain is going to backfire on him. And you notice that McCain had left word that he didn't even want Donald Trump at his funeral, but he wanted the man who defeated him to be at his funeral. One Barack Hussein Obama was to speak at John McCain's service. I don't know whether he spoke today, Friday, or is he going to speak tomorrow, Saturday. But President Barack Obama and others are speaking, but Donald Trump is not on the program. Think about that. He's carried himself in such a dishonorable way and such a disrespectful manner that even his own political cronies don't want him at their funeral. My. This God bless America. And that's what happens when you don't think about nobody but your own little self, your own little tight myopic view of reality that doesn't let other people in, that doesn't want other people to be themselves. And so, as a commentary on the state of our nation, this is a very bad commentary, very bad commentary, that you have a person in the White House that is so self-centered that they cannot even look out for the United States of America. Yes, that is what we have come down to. And these things ought not so to be, because our children are looking at these machinations, these activities, this chicanery, this petulance, this petty manifestation of pique, so to speak. I'm going to hate you till my dying hour and all that type of thing. As I recall, this president was even asked on five different occasions, the day following, or a couple of days following the death of Senator John McCain, may he rest in peace. He said, "Mr. President, what do you have to say to the McCain family?" And he was asked that question on 5 different occasions that day from the steps of the White House, and he was so vindictive that he said nothing. And until finally some of his staff wrote an appropriate statement expressing the sorrow of the nation and the sorrow of the presidential office. Remember, the president is not just the man. He represents that entire office. And as a representative of the office, he should rise above such pettiness, such smallness, but yet he does not. He's not able to rise above himself. And I consider that a very great blot or mark against the presidency of the United States of America. Because remember, he represents the people of the United States. He is our leader. When the people, the world sees him, they see us. And what a sorry spectacle we have been presenting to the entire world. Well, as we get ready to wrap this up on this momentous day, this the momentous occasion, as we always say in the past. And so we tell you now, had a man call me, asked me to come and do a photo shoot, and I asked him how much were they going to pay, and he said, I'll get back with you. Hey, you know what I say? As I say to everybody else, if they, with all these millions and billions and trillions of dollars going around, if they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. God bless you. We out, Doc.